Point at me when you're ready for me to go.
Now is the time, I think.
Oh, it's now.
Yeah, that's why she was saying volume's going.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Gateway Office Hours. I think we're in about our 9th episode now.
Yeah, I think somewhere there. Yeah.
I'm your host, Ben Larson, with my co-host, Carter Laren. We are the co-founders of Gateway. And I think we're finally getting the hang of this, but we were just talking this morning. We might switch things up in the coming weeks here just to keep the content fresh.
Yeah, I want to keep the content fresh. I'm tired of lighting issues, which I like a little bit.
If you
better
guys could
today,
see
but,
what was on the flip side of these
Yeah.
cameras, it's bright.
Yeah, we're yeah. This was a makeshift thing, and we should switch to a slightly better
It's
makeshift
time to
thing.
graduate. Although I'd have to say, makeshift for us is pretty good.
It's not bad.
Okay. We don't have many announcements today, but what I would say is there's some exciting events coming up that aren't hosted by us that we're participating in. New West Summit in San Francisco coming up October 14th and 15th at the Hyatt. I heard Sir Richard Bronson is going to be there. Branson.
Yeah, Bronson is Charles Bronson. That would be awesome if he was there, but I don't think he's there.
The Richard.
But Sir Richard is pretty awesome
Yeah,
also.
pretty awesome. October 14th and 15th, Carter will actually be hosting one of the panels.
I hear.
Public investing
I
in
am.
cannabis stocks. That's
yeah.
on the 15th, I believe.
Yes.
No, 14th,
No,
Friday.
it's Friday. Yeah.
14th.
I want
Okay.
to subtitle it something like, or how not to lose your money on the pink sheets. But
Which is actually in the current events right now.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later. If you are interested in going to New West, there's actually a Gateway discount code, 50% off your ticket. Just use Gateway with capital G as your discount code, and that will take that 50% off. So we'll see you there. And then also, we're going international. What is it considered? I mean,
Canada is another nation, Ben. I know it seems like it's an extension of the U.S., but it's not.
it's like the apartment upstairs, you know.
Yeah, I don't think they appreciate that.
Probably not. Where's Pranav when you need him?
Yeah.
Anyways, ICBC Vancouver, November 13th and 14th. November 13th. October 13th, actually.
October.
My
Did
bad.
you see November?
Yeah.
It's right before New West. In fact, it overlaps with New West, so
Then
I'm going
I-
to have to fly back to go to the New
Oh,
West.
this is. I hope I don't have to change my flight. No, just kidding. I'll be there.
No, I booked to the same flight as you.
I did these in reverse order then. October 13th and 14th in Vancouver, again at the Hyatt. Hyatt's making a lot of money off the cannabis industry, apparently. We should strike up a partnership with them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um,
Although I feel like it's more of a Hilton thing. The Paris Hilton, it's more of a... Maybe not.
yeah, could be. Anyways, Carter and I on stage together. That should be interesting.
Yeah.
We might actually have to prepare this time.
Yeah, we should prepare.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell Alex. We'll prepare. October 13th, 14th, ICBC, Vancouver. If you're Canadian, we'll see you there.
Also, in a non-cannabis thing, can I just I'm geeking out that Gabor Mate is a keynote speaker at that conference.
I don't know who the hell that is, but okay.
I know, but I love Gabor Mate. He's
Gabor Mate.
He's an awesome guy.
I'll have to Google him.
Yeah. Long story.
Okay. So 2 cool events coming up. I'm happy to be a part of both of them. Shout out to my friends over in Berlin doing Valley in Berlin in the coming week. I wish I could be there, but going to miss out this time. A lot going on over here. Speaking of a lot going on, there's some interesting news this week that we don't typically do kind of like a news break or like reflect on it.
We have no format really standards, so we can.
Questions and answers is generally our format, Carter.
Yeah.
Okay, but I did want to talk to him because I think they are good talking points. The first one being of Mass Roots being in the news. You know, Isaac was just out here for Elevate. Great founder, you know, energetic, great leader. But they did have to go like the interesting route of taking the company public early, help with the funding, and it actually, you know, in a sense, it worked. They got the funding they needed. They ramped up. They have a ton of users. I don't know what their user base is now. It's not 1 billion, but you know, it's pretty big.
But they had some issues this week.
they did have some issues this week. So
Unfortunately.
something about like defaulting on nearly $1 million worth of promissory notes.
Yeah. Well, my first reaction was that it was really weird, but then I think you had a good explanation for it.
Yeah, so I mean, just a little bit of background on Mass Roots. Like they are publicly traded, but it's on a lesser known, you know,
They're on the pink sheets, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
pink sheets is generally what you call the penny stocks. But they were making a
Fair.
run. They were making a run for the Nasdaq. It would be the first cannabis traded company on the Nasdaq.
Yeah.
People thought they might have had a fair chance, and so I think they were raising a large sum of money because there is a minimum requirement of funds in the bank to be on the Nasdaq. And when they failed to get on the Nasdaq,
Which wasn't because of money. It was just
it was just a moral
cannabis.
Yeah, cannabis.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So now they had this money that they had borrowed with the expectations that it'd get on the Nasdaq, and that would have catapulted them into, you know, the kind of mainstream. But that didn't actually work. Yeah. So now there's this situation going on where people are calling on their notes, and there's not enough money in the bank to pay them.
Right.
I mean, what are your general thoughts on the situation? We could dial it back and talk about kind of the going public thing secondarily, but
Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of going public generally, other than as an investor, it's nice to get liquidity, so go public. But from a founder perspective, it's not something that ever been sounded appealing to me. But it's usually weird to have investors on a convertible note. I don't know, was it convertible notes or just promissory notes in general? Like,
I think the news was saying promissory notes.
oh, so maybe they weren't convertible notes, but it's, you know, typically convertible note investors don't usually call they don't usually call the investment. Like, it's not, if you can't pay, usually they're like, yeah, but we invested in the company, so let's work something out, or I'll give you an extension or whatever. I guess this was just straight up loans. You know, I think it's risky. I mean, the first companies that are kind of pioneering going on mainstream stock markets are going to take big risks because had Mass Roots not been a cannabis company, they wouldn't be in this problem.
Right.
It would have worked.
Yeah.
And so they followed the model that non-cannabis companies would follow, and probably, I mean, I don't know the details, but they probably executed well and did everything they were supposed to. And cannabis, the taboo of cannabis, shut them down. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm not sure what to say about that. It's not something that early stage founders need to worry about.
Well, let's zoom out a little bit. I remember when I was speaking at our first conference, and someone approached me afterwards and like trying to like, oh, we should work together, do all this, like you're running a program.
Oh, I know what you're going to talk about. Oh, fuck.
He's like, I'm like, oh, great. Like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, well, I help take startups public. I'm like, cannabis startups? He's like, yeah, I help cannabis startups go public. Right. And I'm like, that's a thing? I'm like, why is that a thing? And I just had this visceral reaction, you know, coming from the tech space. It's just like, people don't do that. There's a reason that you don't go public as a startup because, I mean, just the exposure and like you're making decisions on the fly as a startup.
The overhead necessary to manage a publicly traded company is ridiculous.
Sure. But even as a startup, you're making decisions day to day that you can't worry about like what 1,000 other people are going to think about your decision, right? Like you need to do this in the private bubble. It's like that's what a startup is. Yeah. And in fact, you know, like Brandon David, the host of Investing in Cannabis, asked, you know, like when does a startup no longer a startup? Which is kind of like, it was a very big open-ended question. Yeah. But in this sense, it's like, well, when you have like a fixed revenue model or fixed, you know, business model, and you're confident in that, and you're kind of on this trajectory of like you're growing and expanding and everything's predictable, that's when you're no longer a startup. That's when you're kind of like a business, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I view a startup as basically a company, in my mind, a startup is a company that's recent, like recently founded in the past several years, right? and B, one which maybe hasn't necessarily proven a viable business model yet, where there's still significant risk in, will this work, right? Like, and you can count companies that are actually quite big in that, because even though they've raised a lot of money, they haven't shown a profitable engine that will clearly have positive unit economics and be paying for itself and grow into a big company, right?
Right.
And startups also, there's an implication that startups need to have like a fast growth trajectory. So that's another thing about startups that makes them different from like a mom and pop startup. But yeah, I mean, I kind of want to talk about the
other thing,
going public thing a little bit, because that's so I was approached as a founder by someone who wanted to do basically they did the same thing. There's a lot of predatory people from the finance world who do this, and just to like make founders aware of, not everyone does this. I'm not saying that this is like everyone who comes up to you to talk about going public, but if someone's approaching you about going public and you don't have Series C capital, so you can go talk to your many venture capitalists who've invested in you about whether you should go public, then it's probably too soon, and that's a red flag. So look into what they're talking about. Often what they're doing is they're not talking about a traditional IPO. They're talking about something that you would call like a reverse merger. In Canada, it would be called an RTO. But it's where there's like a shell corporation that's been sitting around for a while. It's like kind of dead, but still on life support with no real operations. That's already public, and they have control over it. So these kind of finance guys, they have control over a bunch of these, or they can get control over a bunch of these, and they also have a lot of connections to money. And so what they do is they, to quote, bring you public, is they roll your company into that company, right? But your company kind of takes over it. So like the way that they might describe it is like, your company is like the parasite that then takes over the host completely. Like, oh, the host is just this shell, but you're gonna come in and like your company will take over this host. But like but this host is public, so you're kind of public without a traditional IPO.
Sure. Right?
And suddenly you're public, and what they'll tell you is like, oh, we can then raise a lot of money on the public markets, and I know how to raise money for public companies, and I've got a lot of people, and this is what we'll do. So typically they get a large percentage. And they'll also talk about how much money they'll make you. But not all the time, but a large percentage of the time what ends up happening is they get all of their friends and people they want to make money to do kind of the initial investment push to like get you public. They infuse a lot of capital, throw you onto the public markets, it's almost like pump and dump, like make a big stink about you, and then they cash out. And then you're left with a bunch of other investors who invested in you, and typically your stock crashes again after that. And then all this money that you're supposed to have raised, actually you didn't raise. Like it was in the bank for a microsecond, or it wasn't even in the bank. It was on paper. For like a short period of time on paper, your stock was worth a lot, and then it wasn't. And they make a bunch of money by being part of that scheme of like pulling you in to the public market, pumping you up, cashing out, and then they kind of leave you with this business to manage, where you've got massive public reporting requirements and no money, and your stock actually isn't worth anything because frankly it shouldn't be, because you're a startup and you don't actually have a provable viable business yet.
Yeah, you're spending all your money.
Right. And so there's a lot of super predatory people like that, and I've been approached by them startups in the past. The first time I was approached by someone like that, my co-founders and I were like, ooh, this is interesting. This guy sounds great, and he has a private jet and he can pick up, right?
Oh, the private jet.
And we're like, oh, wow. And so we we got very excited about it, and then we just did a little due diligence, and literally like we ended up just Googling this guy and some stuff, and like the word fraud and look for lawsuits, and it was like, oh shit, like there's a history of corpses.
Yeah.
This guy's left a trail of corpses in his bed, and the guy like actually came in with often these people get a lot of accolades that sound really good because you don't know what they're for. Like you don't actually know the organizations, and like some financial organization named him the blah blah blah, and like so he sounds really good. And the first guy that approached us actually, he had been like I think it was some president. I think it was Obama. Had like named him as some key player in something or other, and like he was like on all these governmental commissions for like he sounded like a real guy, right? And I'm sure to the finance people that he was friends with, he is a real guy. He makes them money.
Yeah.
But he doesn't give a shit about your startup or you.
And friends watching, if someone does approach you with a private jet, I wouldn't be so starstruck. Go and see if their clients are flying private jets, because that's your goal, right? You want the private jet.
Right.
Like if you're just funding someone to have a private jet, that doesn't make you cool. But if his clients have private jets, then maybe he's worth taking a look at. He or she. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, so, the big thing is like, who have they touched in the past and how do those people feel about it? And you can do diligence on that, and you can call up founders that have worked with those kind of people. But, in general, I would highly recommend against going public in any way until, you're much, much bigger and, you can literally, you've got VCs on your board who've gone public with companies before, and like they'll tell you, someone else will tell you it's time to go public.
Yeah.
Generally, not you.
Right.
Like, you'll have an investor on your board who's done this before, who's a VC, and you'll be well beyond the stage where you're even talking to me or Ben. Right? Like,
Yes.
And there'll be some venture capitalist who's like, yeah, we've taken 28 companies public in the last 10 years, and it's time for you, and we want an exit, and we've been in your company for 7 years now, or whatever it is, and that's when that discussion happens. It doesn't happen when you're like 3 people at a co-working space, which is literally the guy that approached us. We were like 5 or 6 people, but we were at a co-working. It was like there was no reason for them to actually be interested in us.
You'll know when the time has come.
Yeah.
And fear not, cannabis investors, the time will come. I mean,
Sure.
Cannabis is often like compared to alcohol. And if that's the case, if cannabis does grow to the size of alcohol, did you just hear
It did
about
in Washington, right?
It is happening in Washington. But before we get to that, did you hear the recent, this is not cannabis related, the acquisition between Anheuser-Busch, InBev, and Miller?
No.
Yeah, they're joining forces.
Ooh,
they're going to own 27% of the alcohol market.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. It was, I think, the biggest merger in history.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's super interesting.
But that being said,
They've got lots of money for acquisitions.
They have lots of money for acquisitions. That's right.
Your cannabis-infused tea.
Yes.
Now's the time. No.
Yeah, but
Eventually,
if you're trying to draw parallels between cannabis and alcohol, that's pretty exciting. And Michael Finkbeiner actually tweeted an article to us that was saying that legal cannabis sales met alcohol sales up in Washington.
Yeah, I saw that. Super interesting. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Honestly, it's not surprising to me.
It's not surprising.
It
might be surprising to various audiences.
I think once you let go of the mental taboo of cannabis and start considering it as a thing to consume generally, it's a lot more attractive than alcohol in many, many ways, very often. Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah.
It's not surprising to some of us, but it's probably surprising to the mainstream. And I think, look, it's still pretty new, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's 2016. It's only been legal in Washington for a few years.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool.
Yeah. That's and honestly, for me, for many of us, that's what makes November very exciting.
Yeah, in California. Yeah.
California, especially, and the 8 other states on the ballot.
Yeah, because I'm California focused there, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so I just want to bring up that was our current events. I mean,
Oh wait, look, I have.
You have more.
No, I'm trying to pay attention to questions on Twitter this
Yes,
time.
we got called out on not being live focused. We are in the market for a producer at some point.
Yeah, we should.
Sponsorship first, then
There's a bunch
producer,
of
right?
comments, mostly from Michael, but I don't see a lot of questions, so it's okay. I just want to make sure we're paying attention to questions.
Okay, so we covered our current events, and well, look at that. It took first 20 minutes of the show.
Yeah, whatever. We have no actual stop time, so who cares?
Yeah. All right. There is one topic that is unrelated to what we've talked about so far, but like I just want to kind of jump into it. We talked a lot about hiring in previous episodes. We talked about how to like bring on the right team, who to hire first. Maybe we didn't address Patrick's question specifically about whether a technical founder should hire more technical staff or support staff. I mean, that's a very case by case basis. We could touch on a little bit.
Patrick, the answer for you is more support staff. We already talked about that, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it depends on the person. But where I want to take this conversation is not the part that I like more, but something that I'm pretty passionate about is firing. I mean, there's a saying in Silicon Valley: you hire slow and you fire fast.
And we've quoted Adeo before about
many times.
When should you fire?
Yeah.
As soon as you think to yourself, should I fire this person?
Yes.
Which I think we've even said on the show before.
This is the third time, I believe.
Great. So Patrick will yell at us for that too. Or no, Chris will. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris is our checker on that. Anyways, firing people. I mean, there's like the tactical way. There's the why you're doing it. I mean, let's just open it up. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Well, I think I said this yesterday to you in a it was to you and someone else, but I don't remember who it was. Patrick is like over in the corner giggling. It's really weird.
We're on a roll.
And
this
it wasn't
morning.
Patrick that I said this to, so I don't know why he's giggling. But firing is, I mean, if you haven't done it and developed an ice cold heart, it's quite difficult to do. Most people are like try and be good people and are caring and empathetic, and it's it sucks to get fired, but everyone understands that. I think not a lot of people understand how emotionally difficult it is to do the firing, and I know it sounds kind of silly to like care about the emotions of the person causing the quote harm, but as a startup founder, that's going to be you, and we're trying to care about startup founders and stuff they have to deal with. And it's hard. It's hard to fire, especially if you like the person, which a lot of times you do personally like the person. Yeah. I mean, if you hate them personally and they're, they kick the puppy on the way to the office every morning, and like, it's easy to fire them because you're like, you're just an asshole. Like,
yeah,
I want to fire
worst.
you. Absolutely. But a lot of times you like the person and you wanted them to succeed. And
a lot of times you put a lot of effort into it.
You put a lot of effort into it. A lot of times you really wish that they could stay somehow. So I've done this. I mean, a lot of founders will have a problem with someone and they'll immediately start to think, well, what else could they do? How can I keep them? Right? And they'll go through this how can I keep them phase where they try and think about, well, okay, they're shitty at this, but maybe they could do that, or maybe they could do this. And sometimes that works. Sometimes you realize, I just have them in the wrong role, and actually there's this other thing that we really need that they could do and we can do. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Maybe the thing that they're really good at isn't something you need right now, or whatever it is. Or maybe they're just a horrible cultural fit. The thing that helped me, so I always got like butterflies in my stomach, and I hated having firing discussions. But I knew I needed to do it. So your responsibility as a founder is to your company. And I know there's a lot of pushback about thinking about companies as entities, and like as a sentient being. Obviously, the company is not a sentient being, but the company is a collection of people. That's all a company is, right? A company is a group of people who've agreed by contract to work together in some way for a cause.
And when it's a startup, that's typically a very noble cause. Like you're driving something
Right.
that doesn't currently have profitability. There's this end vision that you're all driving towards, and it's typically very lofty.
Yeah, so a company is just a group of people, and you owe that group of people, and that group of people includes yourself, other employees, other founders, other stakeholders, your customers, investors, right, who have taken a risk on you or taken a bet. You owe them doing the best job you can in making this company successful and fulfilling your goal that you've articulated. And so it's your responsibility to fire, hire obviously, but it's your responsibility to get rid of someone when they're not a good fit. And so even though you don't want to do it and it feels horrible, it's your responsibility and you have to. So you need to learn to do it. And the thing that I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but the thing that really helped me was I went into firing discussions thinking of myself originally as like the villain. Right, like, fuck, I've got to go fire this person. I'm the villain. I'm making this decision, and it's gonna affect them, and they're gonna be upset, and blah blah blah, and But I shifted my mindset, and it really really helped. I still don't like it, and I still often will get butterflies in my stomach or whatever. I don't enjoy the conversations, but it made it a lot easier. And when I shifted my mindset to, I really think of myself more as like a mirror that I'm just holding up a mirror for them. That's all I'm doing.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like I'm just a messenger of reality, right? Reality is it's not working.
Yep.
I'm just telling you what reality says. All right. I'm not like, in some sense you can blame me for making the decision, but I shouldn't be making decisions based on gut feel or random things. They should be fact-based, which means that reality is saying you don't fit here.
Yeah.
And that's not my fault, right? I'm just the messenger.
Yep.
And
so
the truth is they're better off. Like, I know this sounds also cliche, but like the truth is people are better off having a realistic view of their lives and their self and what's going on. And like, so if I'm just the messenger from reality, telling them what's going on and the consequences, they may be mad at me, but ultimately it's better for them. Yep. And frankly, I owe it to the other employees, their coworkers, everyone else. It's better for them too.
So drilling down and just kind of making this more of a like I guess less hypothetical, more just kind of like real life. You're kind of like you're identifying, what the person's shortcomings are, or what their strengths or weaknesses are, and how that aligns with what the company's needs are, and how they're maybe misaligned, and like just drawing the transparency of the situation, and you're kind of you're the messenger for the company at that point, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, be like, look, you're really good at A, B, and C. We don't need A, B, and C.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of our viewers are founders, right? They might be in a situation where they need to fire someone, and this is a great approach. But like when it comes to tactically, like, is there things that people should avoid? Like, obviously being emotional about it, and
I mean, there's all these theories about firing on a Friday and blah blah blah, but I think not being emotional about it is super important.
Because a lot of times, I mean, we don't have like these robust HR teams and stuff like that as startups. And you don't want to get yourself into a lawsuit situation.
I was going to say you probably don't have a robust HR team. Yeah. However, you should at least, if you're going to fire someone, I know we say fire fast, and that's, I mean that, but I don't mean fire instantaneously.
Right.
It's not like, it's not like, oh, we should fire this person. Yes. Okay, call them in the office right now. Like, that's not how it works. It's like, okay, well, what are the things that we need to do? So some typical things. Usually when you hire them, you should probably have a termination certificate as one of they haven't signed it, but it's a exhibit and usually in their offer letter, so that they know what the termination certificate will look like.
Right.
And typically
I've seen people sign those on the first day on accident. It's like, oh, you didn't read what you were signing.
yeah, no, I've had people sign them as well, which always is a red flag for me because I'm like, you're very trusting, but you didn't read this. But the termination certificate basically, I like to try and offer some kind of severance. It doesn't have to be a lot, especially if you're a startup, but it could be like, hey, you can stay on for another, I'll give you another couple weeks if you help with the transition or whatever, like some kind of like small thing. Or we'll let you keep vesting for another month if you help with the transition or something like that. Whatever it is, some kind of small thing. But what you do is you offer that small thing to them in exchange for signing the termination certificate. Right? Because you need them to sign it, but you can't force them to sign it. So you need to like give them some kind of incentive where that incentive only happens.
Where I push back on that a little bit is, there are certain situations where you want, as soon as you have the conversation, you want the person out the door, right? You want them locked out of the email, because some people are pretty malicious.
Oh, right. So if it's yeah, it depends on the person. And even the example I gave, that doesn't mean you don't lock them out of email and out of the office, right? It might be like help with that transition might be like,
from home
on your
and
Gmail,
your personal
right?
Right.
And in actuality, you might not actually use much help. Like there might not actually be much help that happens.
Sure.
But it's a sort of a face-saving thing sometimes. The goal isn't really to get a lot out of them. The goal is to like show that there's some kind of value that they have and that they can still provide, and in exchange you'll give them something. Or, it could just be like if you're farther along and you have money to give them just a severance, great, you can just do that. But if you actually need them to do a couple things, there are some cases where, you can fire someone and it's not super contentious, right? You'd be like, look, it's not working out. We don't have money to pay you for this right now because, this isn't happening, or you had these goals that you didn't meet or whatever it is. And, sometimes if you've hired the right person, often that person will be understanding and like, yeah, I saw this coming. I know it sucks, blah, blah, blah. Right. I've had those kind of firing discussions.
Sure.
I've also had firing discussions where like, people stole stuff and then tried to sue me. So
Stole and then tried to sue. Oh, awesome.
yeah. So, there are crazy people out there. But getting the term certificate signed, also you like owe them all of their pay up until the date. So you usually want to have a check at the exit interview and be like,
i.e. money in the bank.
right, yeah. Here's your final pay up until this moment, right? Up through today, right? Here's a termination certificate, and that termination certificate, like here's what you get with signing the termination certificate. You also get like this other thing or whatever, right? We'll let you keep your laptop, which is a company laptop, whatever you want to give them, or you can keep vesting for another month or whatever it is. But in the conversation itself, I would keep it impersonal. I try and like I try and make it. Ideally, it's like an understanding. Like, look, I like you as a person or whatever. I'm just, I'm sorry that this is the way it's going. Blah blah blah. Everyone knows that. You don't just scream you're fired at someone. It's not.
Right. Yeah. If you are feeling emotional and you're fighting,
that's not the time to do it.
Cool down.
Yeah.
Call a meeting.
Right.
Yeah, go at it level-headed.
Yeah, and often, sometimes it's helpful to have someone else in the room. So if you have a co-founder, it'd be great if both of you were there. Sometimes a witness is important.
Yeah.
If you do have something that goes awry, it's often important to have someone else there. If you're a sole founder and you just have a bunch of other employees and there's not really a hierarchy, I wouldn't like get their colleague next. Like that's not appropriate.
Sure.
But if it's someone that they report to or like someone who's senior to them, then totally yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a little bit of a roller coaster of an episode.
Oops.
We're talking about the downs of Massroots, but I'm sure they'll bounce back. Isaac's a great founder. Every company sees their ups and downs. This is a rough patch. We'll see.
Well, and it's a rough patch that's not. I don't think it's endemic to their business, based on what I know.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of details, but it's a rough patch that they hit because they tried a thing
Thing didn't work.
that didn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, don't do that thing again.
Yeah. Talked about the bright side of the cannabis market showing very strong signs of being a major player in mainstream markets. It was actually interesting. I haven't told you about this, but I was talking to some friends over in Australia, and the medical market's really ramping up over there.
Is this Adam?
Yeah, Adam Miller.
Okay.
So it's a budding tech, exciting new program that's starting out there. And then, ended on the sorry note of firing. But you know what? After you go through those pains of firing someone, it is generally, you always come out the tail end feeling a lot better and moving forward a lot faster.
Oh yeah, I mean it's almost
It's refreshing.
I almost feel guilty for it sometimes because it's like there's all this build up, this emotional build up for like, oh my god, I don't want to have this discussion. It's gonna be horrible, and then you have the discussion, and you're literally, that evening on the car ride home, you're like, woohoo,
Yeah.
like because it's this burden that's been released from you. It's
Yeah.
like, oh good, that's over. They didn't go ballistic. Everything's gonna be okay. We can move on now.
Yeah.
Like it's super.
You can kind of see
freeing.
where Donald Trump gets such joy out of telling people they're fired.
Oh yeah, that was him, isn't it?
You're fired.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at accents. Maybe
I can't do Donald Trump. Well,
Is that an accent? What do you even
New
call
Yorkish?
that?
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that was reality TV.
Yeah,
Hopefully he doesn't fire people like that in real life, but
I wouldn't be
who
surprised.
knows? Who knows?
I think it might be even worse.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Anyways, now we're rambling. Okay, if you have questions, please email us at ask@gtwy.co or hit us up on the Twitter, Instagram at the hashtag GatewayOH.
Follow for the live stream or the updates on the whatever it is.
Follow us
There's some
for
button
the live
this.
stream.
Yeah.
And then catch us at ICBC Vancouver, October 13th and 14th in Vancouver at the Hyatt, or the New West Summit, hanging out with Sir Richard Branson.
Branson. You still want him to be Bronson.
I don't know why.
It's all right, man.
October 14th and 15th,
Yeah.
Hyatt, San Francisco.
Yeah.
We will see you
Next week,
next week,
possibly from 15 feet that direction.
possibly that way, possibly someone else.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Are we going to do that? Maybe.
We kind of want to start having people on the show, which is why we need to move away from a table with 2 seats.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
all this backlighting is kind
Yeah,
of crazy.
yeah.
Anyhow, no one cares. Peace.